A 1963 Lettera 32 typewriter that once belonged to the watchdog of democracy, and a pioneering woman in journalism that authored compelling articles which set the bar for sharp and authentic storytelling. A 3M Littman stethoscope that has sat on the chest of a young immigrant boy turned revolutionary doctor who opened the doors of a state-of-the-art breast cancer facility treating thousands of patients. A vial of soil nurtured by generations of hands and gathered by a young man aching to someday return to his family's fruitful groves of Jimsu, Palestine, that he was forced to leave behind in 1948. A 1920 Dalton adding machine that belonged to an innovative businessman who would establish one of our nation's leading clothing manufacturers. Handwritten notes ambitiously written by a powerful poet who would turn them into a best-selling children's book and become one of the most influential writers of our time. To the unknowing eye, these objects may seem ordinary, but housed between the walls of our nation's first and only Arab American National Museum, they tell an extraordinary story. Since 2005, the Arab American National Museum has proudly stood as a powerful reclamation of our narrative, emerging as a beacon of pride, celebration, and inspirational legacy. A Smithsonian affiliate and crown jewel of Arab America, the museum has forged a magnificent Arab American mosaic, capturing the rich culture and contributions of Arab Americans who have written the history of our nation.
So we had the family of one of the largest manufacturers of dress slacks call us up to make a donation of artifacts. It's the Hager Clothing Company, and they had numerous items to donate. The artifacts were sent to us by Joe Hager Jr., and it includes an entire office suite from the 1920s, including an adding machine, a telephone with a very primitive intercom system built into it, a desk, the time card machine, including the holder for time cards, a typewriter, and some other little office-related materials. Almost a very complete set of what the office might have looked like in the 1920s.
What we were given was not just a replica, but Joseph M. Hager's original 1920 office suite that was the birthplace of the Dallas-based apparel company Hager Clothing Co., even catching the attention of President Lyndon B. Johnson, who claimed that Hager's slacks were the best in the United States.
So Hager was only 13 when he left his home village of Jazin, Lebanon. Upon arrival, he did what a lot of Arabic-speaking immigrants at the time did. He became a peddler, which was instrumental to him building skills as a salesman and running a business. He worked as a dishwasher, a salesman, a cotton grader, and he even sold overalls on the road. So on January 22nd, 1923, Joseph M. Hager became a naturalized citizen of the United States. 20 years after leaving Lebanon with a handful of sewing machines and a small staff, he founded the Hager Clothing Company in the Santa Fe building in Dallas, Texas.
What began as a small company evolved into a household name that revolutionized the clothing industry and expanded its operations overseas under the leadership of Joseph and his two sons, Ed and Joe Jr.
The company was the first to bring mass production to slacks through an assembly line. That innovation shaped the industry and changed the way that men dressed. So it's no surprise that the company became one of the world's largest apparel manufacturers.
While Hager's influence on the clothing industry was monumental, it reached far beyond just that. Hager was a passionate philanthropist in his community, even raising funds to build St. Jude Children's Research Hospital in Memphis, Tennessee. He viewed his success as something he was responsible for sharing, making an impact in our society for years to come. About 11 years after the Hager Clothing Company opened its doors, there was a boy in Yemen who persistently chased his dream until it became a reality, no matter what obstacle came his way. His ambition for learning and his passion for medicine caught the attention of King Yahya of Yemen, who personally wrote a letter in support of his educational pursuits. This significant moment launched Dr. Rashid Abdu's remarkable 50-year career as a surgeon and caretaker.
At 11 years old, Rashid Abdu went to work at the U.S. Air Force Base in Aden, Yemen, where he learned English. There he met American consul Harlan E. Clark, who helped to save Rashid's cousin from a life-threatening illness, and it was that moment that helped Rashid see that he wanted to become a doctor. Harlan supported Rashid and helped him come to the United States. After high school, he received a 4-year scholarship at Lafayette College in Pennsylvania, where he studied pre-med. After graduating, he earned his MD from George Washington University.
Dr. Abdu's love for humanity was the driving force behind all that he accomplished. Even in the face of heartbreak, Dr. Abdu channeled that love into his greatest accomplishment yet, an award-winning state-of-the-art facility established in memory of his wife that would increase access to healthcare for women from all socioeconomic backgrounds.
After his wife unfortunately passed away from breast cancer, he worked for years to found the Joanne Abdu Comprehensive Breast Care Center, where since its inauguration it has screened tens of thousands of women for breast cancer and made hundreds of diagnoses.
Today, Dr. Abdu's healing tools adorn the walls of the museum's Coming to America exhibit. Though they may seem small, these tools have become a symbol of not only Dr. Abdu's personal success, but of the capacity we all have to lead more compassionate lives. The Arab-American story is oftentimes a story of sacrifice, family, and opportunity. Some, like Dr. Abdu and Hagar, made a decision to relocate and seek better opportunities. Others, however, found themselves displaced from the only country they knew as home. At 31 years old, Ahmed Ibrahim found himself sitting on a stoop in Brooklyn, unsure if he was ready to start his new life in America. He had sacrificed his land, home, and community to travel nearly 6,000 miles and build a future for his family in a foreign country.
Ahmed Ibrahim was born in the village of Jimsu, Palestine, in 1922. Following the declaration of the State of Israel in 1948, Ahmed and his family were forced to leave their home, their wheat mill, and their groves of fruit and olive trees. They fled to the West Bank, where they lived in a tent near Ramallah. The weather got colder, and they moved from town to town, seeking shelter and work. His wife Aisha had a cousin in Brooklyn who was willing to sponsor Ahmed as part of the Refugee Relief Act. Except for her necklace that she received as a wedding gift, Aisha sold all of her jewelry to pay for her husband's trip to America. She sent that necklace with Ahmed as a gift for the cousin's wife in appreciation of hosting Ahmed. So he's seated alone on the porch, and next to him is a case of the objects that he was able to bring from home that represented his life that he had in Palestine. There's a prescription bottle full of dirt and rocks, this medicine vial that held the soil from his home that he could no longer return to. There's the cane that his father used to use, so he always remembered his father with this cane.
While it took some time, Ahmed found work and saved every dollar he earned to eventually reunite his family in the U.S. in 1966. Each of us has an Ahmed in our family history, someone who sacrificed everything they thought made them who they are so that the following generations could not only survive, but thrive. They did one of the hardest things imaginable so we didn't have to. And we honor that courage and strength every day as we live out each chapter that becomes part of the larger Arab-American story. History's most unsung heroes have always been the women who have woven our story into the fabric of this nation. The women who have asserted themselves as some of the most prominent narrators of our history and who speak truth to power even when it is uncomfortable or defies expectations. From the women who opened the doors of our institution to the women whose phenomenal lives are at the heart of the museum, our story would not exist without them. Sitting in the front row of history was the daughter of Lebanese immigrants, a trailblazer, and a woman who would single-handedly shatter the glass ceiling for women and Arab Americans in journalism.
Helen Thomas was born in 1920 to Lebanese immigrant parents and moved to the Detroit area when she was 4 years old. She attended Wayne State University, where her interest in journalism first took hold. She would go on to serve for 57 years as a White House correspondent but she was known for asking tough questions and sitting in the front row at press conferences. She got to grill presidents from JFK to Barack Obama. She blazed the trail for women in journalism. She was the only print journalist to accompany President Nixon on his famous trip to China. At President Barack Obama's first official press conference in 2009, Helen was there in the front row and got to ask a question of the new president, to which he responded, "I feel like I've been inaugurated."
Nicknamed the watchdog of democracy, Helen brought a level of truth and authenticity to journalism that people were not used to. She kept every president from John F. Kennedy to Barack Obama on their toes with her quick wit, rapid-fire interrogation, and relentless search for a straight answer.
Her story is important because she was not only a trailblazer for women journalists all across the country, but her advocacy on behalf of the Arab American population meant that the stories that were on the minds of the community were always brought to the forefront to the people in power in the White House. To see her artifacts on display in the museum tells visitors that this was an important woman who played a role in holding all these presidents accountable for their actions. I also just love this typewriter because I like to tell students that this was the first smartphone, that this was her portable typewriter that she would carry from press conference to press conference. There's also a bronze sculpture of her that was made in 2010 and placed in the museum, in which she is pointedly holding a pencil as if to say, "I'm recording this. I'm going to make a record of what happens here." Helen was probably, for a long time, the most well-known member of the Arab American community. Her face was on TV. You could see her asking questions at these press conferences. Her name was in newspapers all over the world. And she always spoke for the community. She always spoke for truth, and she held power accountable. And so I think it's really important that we honor that story here in the museum.
While Helen was asking questions of her colleagues in the newsroom, a young writer was asking questions of the life around her. From handwritten notes to publishing her first poem at age 7 to becoming an award-winning and internationally renowned author, her work is a testament to the beauty and richness of our culture and community.
Palestinian-American writer Naomi Shihab Nye has been publishing work since she first learned to write. She's a beloved author of children's books and young adult fiction. She often writes of her experience growing up as a Palestinian American. Her books about the Palestinian and Palestinian American experience were some of the first widely read books on the market for children and young adult readers, telling the story and keeping the story of Palestine at the forefront of the minds of many Americans, whether or not they were Arab American. Some of the objects we have that helps to tell Naomi's story is a page of handwritten notes of what would become part of City's Secrets, one of her most well-loved children's books. Naomi continues to be an integral part of the Arab American literary scene, publishing poetry and fiction. What I find meaningful about having Naomi's objects on display is it can inspire the young people to see that they can write about their experiences as being Arab American and they can be quite successful with it. It also shows that at a time when not a lot of people in the United States knew the truth about Palestine, she used her writing in a very accessible way to tell that story and get it out to the broader public.
Since 2005, the Arab American National Museum has served as the heart of Arab American storytelling. It has been a way in which we navigate and survive in the world. It's what heals us, unites us, guides us, and inspires us. Whether it's an old typewriter, a vial of soil, a worn-out adding machine, a stethoscope, or a book of poetry, these artifacts come together in our beloved Arab American National Museum, a living, breathing monument of everything that our community has given to this country, and of the history that we will continue to write together. pioneering woman in journalism by a young girl